Hi, everybody. It's Mary Fran Bontempo here. I am the host of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast, and I want to welcome you all back to yet another new season where I'm bringing you terrific guests who are brilliantly resilient, have written amazing books, and have tools and strategies to help you live a brilliantly resilient life. This week, we're starting off the season talking about self-love. And I know it sounds a little weird, which is why I decided it was something we had to discuss. So buckle up, get ready, and welcome back to the new season of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I am here today with Rache Madorsky, who is a psychotherapist, a coach, a speaker, and a best-selling author of How to Love Yourself in Less Than a Week and also for the rest of your life. Rache, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be with you.
So when you were first brought to my attention and I saw your area of expertise, how to love yourself, I was like, nope, not talking about that. That's not something I want to talk about, which was then immediately followed in my head by clearly you need to talk about this because the idea of self-love, I can do self-care, but self-love seems like, I don't know, is it self-indulgent? Is it selfish? There's something about it that makes me uncomfortable. And I assume I'm not alone, right?
You are not alone. You are you are speaking for many.
So, first of all, how did you get to this point? Number one. And then number two, how do you get past that? And it's primarily, I think, women, that feeling that women have that, yeah, I don't want to go too far there. I can love everybody else. I can love and take care of the whole world, but not me, not me.
Yes, it's so natural and common, and I really appreciate you just being real and speaking the truth because it helps us get at actually what that is. And before I answer, I just really want to acknowledge what it says about you as a woman and as a leader and as a human that would initially have that reaction and then lean in and say, okay, that makes me actually want to know more is very
Well, I think,
powerful.
thank you. And I think that that's the key to, all learning and all awareness and all growth, that we have to talk about the things that we don't want to talk about because that's the only way we grow through them. So I'm happy that I'm not alone. I appreciate your vote of confidence there. And I want us to continue this conversation so that we can make it more accessible for other women.
Yes, absolutely. So how I found this as a tangible practice and not a platitude to respond with an eye roll is
Thank you.
this.
That's also another thing that I think people approach that with. So I'm really
Yes,
glad to hear that there's a practical application for this.
exactly. So I would say the first moment that I really felt impacted by this concept, I was in my early 20s. I was really depressed. I had just really seriously started exploring the world of personal growth. I was taking a personal growth course, and this beautiful woman leaned over and she said to me, all of this would get better if you would love yourself. And she said
Ooh,
it with so much care, right? It has
oh
such a
my
feel to it.
goodness.
And here's what happened in that moment. Two things. One is I felt like someone just gave me the cure. They just like gave me the keys to the castle.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I wanted to say, what in the heck is this woman talking about? Like, what does that mean? I mean,
Exactly.
it's an easy thing to say, and no one tells us actually what it means or how to do it. And I felt both those things at once. I went on to live my life, lots of therapy, lots of personal growth, lots of training, lots of degrees, lots of this, lots of that. And I started beginning to be able to just open the door for what it meant. And it wasn't until years later. And one of the things I started to see in my couples practice, I had a very full waiting list couples therapy practice. And I started to notice that every issue, whether it was a couples issue, a business issue, a relationship issue, as we would get to the core of what was really going on, it would all lead back to the relationship we had with ourselves,
Hmm.
the thoughts we think, the way we treat ourselves. And that's when I really took off on the study and the teaching and the learning of it, which I'll tell you more about. But that's that's the long answer.
It's actually a really interesting answer because exactly to your point, we hear so much about things like, oh, love yourself and reset your mindset and all these, I call it the world of woo woo, where, okay, yeah, I know I'm supposed to do all that stuff, but how the heck am I supposed to do it? Give me some strategies. And then how do I go further and implement that and make that a part of me in my life so that I'm not, for lack of a better term, constantly navel gazing, and saying, well, what about me? What about me? There has to be some kind of balance, but we don't have any balance in that area right now because none of us, I don't know a single woman who, if I said to her, do you love yourself? She'd say, yes. I don't know one, not one.
You know one now.
Oh, yay.
and
Oh, I'm
and I
so
would
glad.
and I want to help because I have been there. And this is the thing, and I know you'll relate to this. It's a practice. It's not
Mhm.
like I've reached some peak of some mountain and I'm done cooking. This is a daily beautiful unfolding practice. But I think you and I were talking about this before we hit record, this idea that when we're in an incredible amount of pain or something really serious happens, we think it's going to take that long and be that intense to recover or heal or feel better. And what's so wonderful is that that's not true.
Right.
Um, and so we'll talk about that during this conversation. And there's one other thing I wanted to share. Oh, about the navel gazing. Because I relate. I've had those judgments too. And I
Mhm.
wanted to protect myself from experiencing that judgment from others and protect myself from that judgment of myself. And here's what's so fascinating about this myth, this idea that we want to break, that self-love is selfish. The more we love ourselves, the less attention we have on ourselves, and the more generous we become in a very natural, easy, relaxed way.
I love that because I think right there is the crux of why people don't want to think about this and don't want to actualize it because they think that it, as we said, it will be selfish. And women, I think by nature, are service oriented, and we don't want to be seen as self serving. That's like a four-letter word for us, although a lot more letters.
It's so true. And the opposite, right? Like if we so want to be seen and experienced as generous, to me, that's like one of the greatest compliments.
Oh, absolutely. But
So
I
yeah.
do think, and I think for me at the very least, this has come with age, certainly. I have gotten more comfortable with myself, but it's taken a heck of a long time and a heck of a lot of caca that's happened in, terrible situations to the point where I managed to get through it. Um, and still came out of it. And I think this might be the key, at least for me. So my son is a recovering heroin addict, doing great. Everything is wonderful, which in and of itself is miraculous. But one of the things that came out of that for me was how can I help other people to get through this with what I learned? So I think there's a piece of your self-love piece in there because it was an acceptance of myself that I have something to offer that could help someone else. And it's a part of me that I value. So maybe that's another way people can look at it. What about you? Do you value that you generously give? Is that a part of how you can learn to love yourself?
Yes. And I would say that feeling, when you described it, I felt it so viscerally, like the feeling of, I don't want to talk about that or look about that. I don't need, whatever that resists,
I
get that
know,
away
no,
from
yeah.
me. No, thank you. Um, there is something there. There's always something there for each of us, and it doesn't have to be the same thing. And so, what I like to offer to people is to, even if it's just 3 minutes, I have so many things in this book that you can do in 3 minutes or less because I like to make it fast and light and easy. But in less than 3 minutes, we can just slow down and actually ask ourselves questions. Here's one question: what does self love mean to me?
Hmm. Oh my
And I would,
gosh, who has an answer to that? Like, I can't, that is profound. It's very profound, and we're so not used to asking ourselves that. And I would hope that maybe there's a difference between self-love and self-care, because we talked about that. And I mean, when I mean self-care, I mean, going to a spa for a day. That's not the same thing, right?
right. There's probably a Venn diagram there where, because one of the other questions I've learned to ask that I think is very powerful for all of us is to start the day or reset the day at any time and simply ask, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself right now?
I just basically exhaled into a really contented place with that question, because I don't ask myself that.
Isn't
And
that
you're right.
incredible?
It's insane actually that we don't take the time to ask ourselves, because it doesn't have to be a major thing, I assume, correct?
100% correct. And let's definitely get into that. For me, when I first started asking that question, the answer that would come was just one word, and it was relax.
I was going to say rest. Rest
Yes,
came into my mind. Rest.
for so many of us, that is the answer. Does that mean we take the month off and not pay our rent? No, but it might mean take an extra 5 minutes right now and just sit or slow down or reduce the effort or say, okay, I do have time for a cup of tea, the good tea, or, whatever it
The
is,
good
very simple
tea.
thing, you know,
That
and
fancy stuff.
right, right. Or my mom gave me this piece of advice once, and I've never lost it because I thought it was so beautiful. And this is another thing. I'm going to tell you that story in 1 second. A lot of us come from mothers who have worked so hard. And it would probably be like to go to my grandmother or her mother and ask her if I could, if we could talk to them and say, how often did you ask what you could do to love yourself? I mean, they would laugh. They would,
They'd laugh. They
right?
would. They
Because
would completely laugh.
it was a different time and there was a lot of survival happening. And
Hmm.
it's not easy to ask these questions when we're in survival mode. But the truth is, we actually can. We still can. Um, so the piece of advice that I wanted to share with you is my mom said to me once, if it's $5 or less, just buy it.
I
And
love that.
I love it too. I
I
love it
love
too.
that. I
Tell me,
tell
what do
women
you love
all the
about
time.
that?
I tell women all the time in my speaking, go buy yourself a new lipstick. Just go buy yourself a new lipstick and put it on. Look at yourself in the mirror and just look at how fabulous you are. It doesn't take much. But here's something else, that when you were saying your most common response was to relax, have you ever had people, or have you ever thought about having people respond to that by saying, just be accepting, just accept?
Oh, absolutely. Every one of us is different. And also, we have lots in common. Um, and what's so powerful about this are a number of things. One, that we're rewiring our brain to even consider such a question, just to even consider that. The second is that we take the time to ask it, which teaches us that we're worthy of a few moments of day of
Mm,
turning in. The other thing is no one can actually give us the things we need most better than us.
I
We
love that.
we we know what we need to hear. We know what we're craving. And then the last thing is when we ask a question and we listen to the answer and then we say yes and do the thing, we are building self-trust at a whole new level.
Hmm. I love that self-trust. And that I think, I mean, that's huge. How many times do we make a decision, move forward, try to move forward and constantly experience self-doubt? Is this what I should be doing? Should I be doing something else right now? Should I be doing something for someone else right now? And not feeling like if you do that, you're betraying your mission to be of service. Those two things can coexist: self-service, self-love, and service to others. And to your point, which I love, when you do get more grounded in that, you feel better about yourself and you're more willing to serve others.
Yes, here's a couple examples. Here's one personal example. One of the pains that I lived with for most of my life was I felt so ugly. When I was 16, I thought about taking my own life, even though I had lived through a crazy childhood. The reason I wanted to go was because I just felt so ugly.
And might I say, for anyone who's not seeing this on video, she's gorgeous. Let's just put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And like anyone listening knows that when we have an area that we feel sensitive about, we can get every compliment in the world about it.
Correct.
It doesn't
Doesn't
penetrate,
it doesn't land. Right. No, you're right.
which which is also why self-love is required. So it's something that's taken me a long time to heal. Sometimes I have my moments, but what I wanted to share about it is what I started to recognize is as I started to feel better about my own beauty, like being willing to see it, feel it, experience it, all of this time I had spent with attention on myself because I was upset or worried or not feeling good enough naturally came off of me and onto others. So it's actually, all the places where we have like a hurt or a pain or a worry that we obsess about, that's attention on ourselves.
I never looked at it that way, but you're exactly right. It's not loving yourself is actually kind of harming yourself.
Yes.
It it's a
It,
it's a it's not a physical thing, but as you said, it could lead to that. And you know what I'm also hearing in my head? I keep hearing the word forgiveness. Is that a big part of this? Like I feel like in my life now, as I look back, there are things that I did. I mean, thank God it was never anything horrible, but I didn't treat friends the way I should have. Like certain things that I look back and think, oh gosh, I wish I had done that better, but I can't. It's in the past. So is there a point where where forgiveness is a big part of the self-love piece?
absolutely. And there's a section of this in the book. And so let's bring it here. We think somehow, whether it's culturally or passed down or however, but so many of us think that being hard on ourselves is the thing that will make us better.
Yes. Why?
It's 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 just it's like how consciousness is evolving. Maybe back then that was the best available. Got to work really hard, got to be hard on, there was a very punishing
Maybe
religious.
learning how to run away from the tiger that was chasing you better, like that might have been, but it's
Exactly.
too primal for now.
Exactly. And so what's actually true, and I invite all of the people listening and you and I to only trust me a little and actually try it for yourself because it's our own experiences that really grow us and teach us. So just be, if you like what I'm about to say, I would say simply be curious and try it for yourself. Just lovingly, gently give it a try. And here's what I want to say: the more forgiving and loving and generous we are with ourselves, the faster the healing, the more we're capable of giving, and the more we're capable of receiving. The more we are actually capable of receiving, the more we're capable of giving, the more money can flow in. I think money's really important. I love helping women make money. So to your question, yes, self-forgiveness is really important. It's important to say, wow, I was so human in that moment. I was just a human.
And that's something I think we forget. We hold ourselves to standards that we would never hold anyone else to because they're impossible. And I do think, and you know, obviously all of this is about a level of self-improvement. But when self-improvement to us becomes striving for the impossible and setting ourselves up for impossible goals at which we are going to fail, that's not self-improvement, it's self-sabotage.
Yes, beautifully said. Yes. And here's what's so funny. Not funny, not haha, but I like to use the word sabotage because every time we sabotage something consciously or unconsciously, knowingly or unknowingly, all that's really happening is that something didn't feel safe. And so some part of us wants us to feel safe. And it often happens when we're going for a success, when we're going to achieve something more than we've achieved before. And it kind of messes with our equilibrium. We're used to a certain normal. And on our way to a new and better normal, sometimes we fall. And it's just the part of us that likes to like have everything be familiar. Familiar is safe. So even wonderful things can feel unfamiliar and therefore not safe to our subconscious.
I really love that analogy because you and I were actually talking before, as you said, we started to record, and you very graciously said that you watched my TED Talk, and my response to you was it was absolutely terrifying, and like terrifying to the point where I don't know how many times I tried to talk myself out of doing it. And obviously, I'm beyond thrilled that I didn't, but boy, I was this close. I don't know how many times to just go, yeah, no, no, I'm just going to stay here and type on my little computer and write my books and, you know, do the stuff that I know. But there's no growth there. And at the bottom of all of this is all about how we evolve into being more enlightened, kinder, stronger, better people. And that requires discomfort.
Yes. And also, and that's so lovely the way you said that. And this to me is another piece of the self-love is if we can't love ourselves through the discomfort, we won't grow. When we're doing work, if there's something about us that we'd like to change, if we're looking at it critically, it cannot move. Criticism is like a glue that keeps things stuck where they are. And if we are willing to look at ourselves and say to ourselves, whatever I see in there, whatever Michigas I see, I'm going to see it with kindness. I learned this early on and I loved this lesson. And whoever was teaching said, just look, whatever you see, just say, oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, I was kind of rude just there. Oh, isn't that interesting? Rather than you jerk, you're wrong, and just start looking at things with more kindness, more openness, because we don't want to see ourselves as the bad guy ever. But if we can see the places we want to change with more compassion and love, then there's a smoother, easier path to making the change.
And I imagine then by extension, this goes forward to how we view other people.
Exactly on the nose, the thing. This is part of the misconception, I think, about self-love is we think we're being so loving and forgiving to everybody else. It's not that we aren't. We all are, and we're all doing our best, and we often have lots of effort in that direction. But another truth is that we can only take someone as far as we're willing to go. And if we start giving from the overflow rather than the depletion, the quality of what we're able to give is so much more sweet, beautiful, authentic. It's a higher quality of care for others when we are coming from feeling so filled up and the care is here first.
If we would only listen to the airline people when they're telling us to put the mask on yourself first and recognize that that simple thing is a recipe for life. You have to be the kind of person that you want to help others be, for lack of a better way of putting it. I mean, we all want to help. We want to help, and help our kids and help our friends and help our family and help everybody. But how do you do that if you're not at your best yourself? I mean, I know, at the end of the day, if you have children or whatever and you're tired and a kid asks you for one more thing, you're just like, I can't do it. I just can't. Well, if you're feeling like that all the time, how do you rise to any occasion?
Exactly. I mean, you're seeing it, you're getting it. This is it. This is it. This is it. There's this really cool story I'd like to share, which is this is about one of an amazing man. His name is Steve Hardison. He's been a mentor to me and many others. And there's this beautiful book written about him called The Ultimate Coach by Amy Hardison and one other person. Um, but here's the story. Before I even met him, I had heard all these things about him, that he was wonderful and he was amazing, this, that, and the other thing. And then I heard this story. And the story was that someone came up to him and said, Steve, why is it that everyone feels so loved in your presence? And he said, because I love myself that much. And that
That's
kind of blew
profound.
my mind, right? Yeah.
Because
And
it goes against all of the things that we think, as we said before, all those ideas that self-love is selfish. It goes against all of that. But if you can see yourself as a human with all of your flaws, but all of your graces, and still love that human, how much more can you love other people?
you can feel it when you say it, right? Like you can see
Absolutely.
our ability to actually expand our ability to give and love grows exponentially. And giving and receiving is a circle.
Hmm.
The more we actually allow ourselves to receive, the more there is to give. And there's a distinction between receiving and taking. You know,
Right, right, right. Of
I
course.
I've had times in my life, and I know I've had clients and people, maybe we all know someone who's been particularly like has that needy kind of quality
Mhm.
to them. And I've been there. And when we're in that place, it's just take, 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 or people that you've given to, and like it's just endless. They'll never stop taking if you're willing to give. That's because they're not actually receiving.
That makes a lot of sense. Because if you receive a well thought and well placed gift or grace from someone else, you take that and incorporate it into yourself, and it makes you better.
Yeah, and it fills you up and you feel satisfied.
Right, right. Oh my gosh, I
Um,
love this. This is the best conversation. So I can't believe we're going to have to wind up soon. But before we do
okay.
any of that,
Yes.
I want to talk about, well, one of the things that I told you that I loved, you said staying encouraged, small hinges swing big doors. I love that. Explain a little bit about that within this concept.
Okay. The idea is another way to say it is that if we were in a boat or a plane and we changed direction only by 2%, we would end up on a different continent.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way, but that's true.
Right. So it would be life changing for all of us to remember that it actually can be a very small action repeated. can change the trajectory of our life. And sometimes it's whatever just the first step is. Sometimes it's something simple like, okay, I'm just going to wake up in the morning and ask myself, what's the most loving thing I can do for myself today, just as a practice, even if I think it's silly. Or I'm going to notice every time I tell myself I should do something and instead say I could. Instead of I should call so and so, I should go to the store and get this thing, I could. I don't have to. I could. Any place we can add more sweetness with the intention of growing our self-love, knowing that it's going to grow it for others is a life changer. And the last thing I want to say about that, I'm curious what you want to say too, is this idea we were talking about how it doesn't have to take the same amount of intensity or time to heal
Yes.
something.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we talk about, well, a couple of things that we talk about. One of the things that we talk about in Brilliantly Resilient, first of all, this idea of could and should. One of the things that I've always said to people is when you let go of what should be, you make room for what could be.
Mm, gorgeous. Yes.
So that whole idea of instead of shoulding yourself, and I actually wrote a book called the 11 Commandments for Avoiding Granny Panties. And one of the commandments is thou shalt stop shoulding thyself. Because it puts those constraints on us. And when we get rid of that and open up the could be door, not what should be, but what could be, there's so many more opportunities and so much more possibility for growth and kindness and love and all of those good things. Um, and of course, I just lost my complete train of thought on the second piece that we were talking about. But this whole idea, I know what it was. We were talking about the big pieces and little pieces. You're not going to get the big solution, and you don't need the big solution. Because as trite as it may sound, every challenge presents an opportunity for growth and for learning. Not that you're going to look at it that way. The challenge, let's just say it, it's going to suck. Whatever it is, it's going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. But if you implement one small action at a time, and one of the books that I wrote is called The 15-Minute Master. I didn't mean to plug all my books here, but they're so in line with what you are
It's
saying.
beautiful. Plug them.
It is. It's just serendipitous. The 15-Minute Master, which is live within the next 15 minutes. What can you do within the next 15 minutes? And whether in my mind it was when my son with his addiction issues, what can I do to make things better? But for your point and your purposes, what can I do? What one thing can I do in the next 15 minutes that's loving to me? And
Yes,
and make that at least one part of your day.
absolutely. And sometimes it changes. I had a moment today. I had what's PT stand for?
Physical therapy.
Physical
Yeah.
therapy. Thank you. I had a physical therapy appointment and I had our conversation. I had all these things. And and I said, wow, I don't typically book so many things at the same time, so close to each other, but I did. And so I was driving there and I was feeling the stress. And then, and I was kind of rushing. And then I got stopped at a train track and had to sit, and the whole train came through. And I would love to share with you. I have 3 questions you can ask when you're in any situation that you don't prefer. So I'm in that situation and I said, what is the gift in this? And the gift was that it slowed me down further. And I was able to ask, what's the most loving thing I can do in this situation? And I came up with an idea, it just flowed in. And so I went to the physical therapist. I said, I have a lot of things. Would it be okay if we did 30 minutes today and 90 minutes the next time? And she was so grateful that I didn't cancel. She was so grateful that I even came and we had a wonderful time. I got everything I needed. And then I was able to stop at the store and get something nice to breakfast. And it's like there's always something we can do. And it's always a win-win.
Oh, absolutely. Again, because when you take that stress off of yourself, it allows you to do so many other things, and it doesn't put the stress on anybody else, which we
Exactly.
do. We do that all the time. I mean, when you're frantic and you're barking at people and all that, that doesn't help anybody. So this whole concept, if you still can't wrap your head around the concept of self-love, recognize that it is love not only for yourself, but for the rest of the world. It makes you better.
Exactly. I wanted to even say the courage that it required for you to do two TED Talks, not only one, but even that the first one, I want to remind all of us because I think it helps us feel safe and empowered that every act of courage we do for ourselves, we do for every other woman, past and present.
I
When,
love that.
your willingness to walk through that and do that beautiful talk and say yes to yourself gives others permission to do that too. And then we're doing it for each other.
It's funny, I have 9 grandkids, which is bizarre, but I have 9 of them. They're all really close in age, but I have 4 little girls, and I think about that. They're little, but I think about that, and my 9-year-old, who's the oldest, I said something to her about writing books, that I write books, and she said, "Well, do people know you for writing your books?" I said, "Well, some people do, and some people like what they read." And it was the simplest way that I could explain it to her. But in saying that, I also validated myself. I was like, huh, people do know some of the things that I say, and it's helpful for other people. And that simple acknowledgement was a piece of self-love for me that made me
Yes.
really feel good. So it doesn't have to be this kind of fawning, self-indulgent. It's not about that. It's okay, I'm going to sum up for you. I was going to say, I need you to sum up, but forgiving, care, acceptance, and
Celebrating.
embracing your humanity. Yes, and celebrating your humanity. Rachel, this has
Yes.
been such a wonderful conversation. I have enjoyed every second of it, even though I initially wanted no parts of it. I so appreciate you. If there's anything that you want to leave anybody with, like one thing that they can start off with, and then I want you to tell everyone where they can find out more about you and get your book.
Happy to do that. Um, what I'd like to say is that everyone, especially you listening, is always worthy of more love. And even if you just decide today's the day, even if I don't really know what self-love yet, it doesn't matter. Just make a promise. I'm going to open the door for more love for me and see what happens. And I would love for you to gift yourself this book. It's really short. It's really sweet. I wrote it as if I were writing a children's book for adults so that it would be light and fun. It talks about work. It talks about money. It talks about forgiveness. It touches everything in a very easy, fun way. And you can get it wherever books are sold, or you can find it on my website, which is rachelmadorsky.com.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful conversation. All of that information will, of course, be in our show notes. I can't thank you enough. Everybody, get out there, get Rachel's book, and please love yourself. The rest of us will be better for it. We will all be better for it, including you. And if you need a little more self-love and some brilliance, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. Sign up for our weekly Brilliance Bits. Rachel will be in there in a couple weeks when this episode airs. And you can always reach out to us at howdy@brilliantlyresilient.net. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time on Brilliantly Resilient. Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.